Hello, James.
Hello, Jeff. What's happening?
What is happening? I don't know. It seems like a lot of things are going on, but it sounds like you got some things going on too.
That may be true. It's our first time meeting. That's been so that should be noted.
Yeah, and it's kind of interesting where your only knowledge of a person is based on a tiny thumbnail on Twitter.
Yes. Yes.
It's funny, you know, and I had certain expectations, and I've never met you before, so I kind of thought maybe you were going to be younger and probably a little bit more like was it Nick Bain?
I don't
Who,
even know who that is. So there
but
you go.
anyway, I can almost imagine punk rocker kind of vibe.
Well, that's not far off the mark. It's just the young part's not true.
Yeah, I guess. Yeah. So we meet face to face. Yeah, it's kind of funny because you run in circles of people I've interviewed, which is kind of fun.
Right.
And so you've had experience with a lot of these people that are actually a lot of fun to deal with. So it's just kind of funny that not funny, but it's kind of great that you reached out to say, "Hey, I want to come on."
Yeah, I wanted to come on. I like you said, I'm working on some stuff and I've done this a few years, and I was like, I should really like try to meet people and talk to them and get out in front of as many people as I can before I launch the product, the project.
Words of wisdom. Words of wisdom.
And
Don't.
it's hard to do that, right? Like in your head, you're just like, I'm a nobody, and why am I bothering this? Like when I messaged you and said, can I come on your show? I was just, you feel like a dork for doing that in a certain sense, or at
Yeah,
least I do.
because even though I have my podcast, I have a hard time doing the same for other people's podcasts when I think I need to promote my books. So I feel the same
Right.
way. But the secret is for me. I don't know about anybody else. But part of it's because I do a weekly podcast, and I don't really plan that far ahead of who to invite. And that if somebody pushes themselves, it's easier for me trying to figure somebody to pull in. So it takes a lot less mental effort. Instead of just, hey, can I come on your podcast? Be like, sure. It's like that's easy. It's like,
You've made this much easier for myself.
yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's a funny thing. I think over the past like few years, I've learned that asking, it never hurts to ask. I think that's one of the my takeaways in the past 5 years of doing this is like, don't be afraid to ask people to do stuff. I think the worst that can happen is they say no. They'll say
Well, I
no.
think, we look at the hobby we're involved in. So when I say the hobby, I don't mean RPGs, but I mean being producers and creators in the RPG hobby, and being maybe like I call micro publishers.
Right.
I mean, we're all kind of in the same boat together.
Yeah. We kind of we are, right? We're all just kind of we got things we want to get out, right, of our
Yeah.
head. And we're only uh all too pleased, right? If somebody happens to like the stuff or say a kind word even, right? Like I like that or
To me, it's not a zero sum game what we're in, even though maybe kind of is. But like people buying from you doesn't mean that people aren't buying from me. I mean, there's no sense of competition. I think that I've ever really have come across.
no, no, definitely not. Like we're just doing our thing, and if you enjoy what's coming out of my head, then I'm happy. And if you enjoy what's coming out of Jeff's head or Don's head or whoever's head, be happy, right? That's what it's all about, is just being um, buying stuff that you can use at a table, at your table.
Yeah, I think it is, and I think also for us too. It's like it also seems like everybody's been very helpful too in sharing information.
Yeah.
It's what we're doing from this side of the of the product. It's very complicated, and there's not a lot of guidelines to doing what we do.
Yeah, it's like a crash course, a self-taught DIY, experience. It's
Yes, only crazy hyper focused people do this kind of stuff.
definitely crazy. Save yourself a
Yeah.
lot of trouble, kids. Don't get into this.
Yes. Yeah, I've mentioned before, it's like, if you actually look at the amount of time and energy put in an hourly rate, we're probably, well below minimum wage. But
Right. Right. But we do it for the love. The love
we
of it.
do. We do. And it's just but anyway, it's just kind of funny. It's kind of funny that the industry is small enough. I say industry, but what we're doing is still small enough that when you start knowing a handful of people, it seems like the connections start becoming very apparent among a lot of different people. So yeah, just after talking to you, it's like how many people you've mentioned working with or doing stuff with or hanging out with, which I'm jealous. It's like,
Some
why
good
can't I
time.
live in Michigan, and why can't I live in Dallas, and
Well,
why
come on
can't I
by.
live in Cincinnati?
It's not so hard to move away.
Yeah, well, it is for me, but
I hear that.
maybe I can try and bring the culture to Peoria, Illinois. I don't know.
Peoria, Illinois. Okay.
Yeah.
Can't even say where that is.
Well, all I can say is it's a couple hours south and west of Chicago.
South and west. Is there a university there?
There's Bradley,
Okay.
and University of Illinois is probably an hour and a half away.
Okay.
The thing we're probably most famous for is the saying about playing in Peoria. It plays in Peoria.
Yeah, right.
Yeah, we were so back in the day. This was so Peoria is a test market. It used to be, well, it used to be a huge test market. I don't think it is anymore. And so even like the video game companies back in the 80s, there's huge video arcades. And this was, I think, one of the areas that things were tested out, and not necessarily high tech stuff, but I mean, we definitely were a means of measuring the temperature of the quote unquote common Midwesterner.
Right. You're right. Kind of a crossroadsy, like the farm belt's not too far away, and you have all the traditional Northwest Territories kind of states there too. The Rust Belt.
Yeah, and I think but things have changed, demographics change, the world's changed, so now we're just it's a small city in the middle of not much.
Gotcha.
Not enough to draw the interest of indie game designers to come flocking here.
Right. Why aren't they testing out the latest version of Grand Theft Auto over there?
Yeah, I know. If only. But anyway, so it is kind of interesting. Like, say, the circles. Do you go to the conventions?
Yeah, I get to a few. There's a local, of course, here in Michigan, and it's in Ypsilanti, which is right next to Ann Arbor, which is where I live.
Well, Don sent a thing out about that, and I kind of thought about it for a minute.
It's good, early, late fall con. Usually November, sometimes in October. Sometimes we'll overlap with Gamehole, but usually not. And so it's always kind of well, I want to go to Gamehole, but there's always, Yukon's, 30 miles away, or not even that. So it's kind of an easy choice to make, is to go to Yukon.
Yeah, there's a guy I know in Canada who's annoyed that there's really no great direct flight. And if it wasn't for Lake Michigan, the drive wouldn't be so bad.
I know. That's the other con I go to is I've been going to GaryCon the past few times that they've had it in person. And I always think it's in March, which always is disappointing, because if it wasn't in March, I could take the ferry from like Muskegon over to Milwaukee and then drive the rest of the way to GaryCon.
So how long and how much is the ferry?
It is not cheap. So that is also like a factor. It's like, oh yeah, and then all of a sudden I've got an extra, I can't remember how much it is, to take a car across. Maybe like $300 or something.
But
Let's
you
cover
bypass Chicago.
just to bypass Chicago. Could be worth it.
Yes.
The tolls, those toll roads, just avoid those. Just take the ferry across.
Yeah, but man, you hit that Gary, Indiana, southern Chicago at the wrong times. It's
Oh
bad.
man, it's brutal.
But if you take the ferry, you can do some fishing along the way.
You can just like sit there. I think you sit in your car. I'm pretty sure. Or I can't. There might be like a deck you can go to and drink or whatever. So I think it should be like at least some camaraderie on the ride.
Like tailgating.
Yeah, kind of like tailgating. Maybe. I want to do it. It's been kind of on the bucket list. I'd like to go across the Lake Michigan on the ferry.
Yeah, because I mean, really, from my understanding, which isn't great, but those waters have in the past been pretty treacherous.
Yes.
And so I imagine it's probably the time of year probably does determine whether it turns a nice voyage or you're throwing up while going pitching along the waves.
Yes. I remember going out there on what was it? It was a big sailboat, but that was like, you're up and down on those waves, it's just like, whoa, this is not fun.
Was it the Edmund Fitzgerald on Lake Michigan?
Superior.
Okay.
Even worse. Super cold.
But you have a lot of cod. Yeah. In fact, that's what I think what kept that was a lot of fishing went on there, right? For quite a long time.
Yeah, of course. Even today,
But I don't know, is there commercial fishing going on in Michigan, Lake Michigan?
Commercial fishing? Probably some to a certain degree. We would, we'd go up to the UP and we'll stay, it's not too far away from the bridge. And then, but the fishermen come in and they sell like brown trout or they sell whitefish to like a local market, and you get it like for $5 a pound, $7 a pound, something like that. Super cheap. Just caught that day.
Yeah, we're located well within of nothing being fresh that day. I spent some time in Belfast last year, and they have a market on the weekends, and I had all that fresh fish. It's just like amazingly cheap.
Yeah.
But alas, all I had was a small hotel room, so
yeah,
kind of crazy. So you got a project that you are working on.
Yes.
Netcrawl.
Yes. Yeah. So Netcrawl is I kept on looking for this system that would allow me to run like a game, a session inside the computer. Like everybody kind of goes in and they play inside like a cyber dungeon, and like, what are you going to do when you're in a computer? You're trying to find information. So this is like cyberpunk adjacent, right? Or maybe like a Gamma World adjacent game, right? Because computers were around, or computers are around, and they hold information, right? And so some game, some sort of system, some sort of setting that would allow me to do that, like in MCC specifically, in Mutant Crawl Classics. And I don't know. I've been looking. Do you know of any games like that? Because I still haven't found one. There's like flavors of it, or like dipping your toe in it a little bit. Like Cyberpunk does it a teeny tiny bit.
So what are you? Okay, this is interesting. So you're asking what would be a good system to have the mechanics for doing what exactly would be the core activities?
The core activity would be there's something inside the computer, some sort of information. We can do skill checks for that, right? Today in lots of systems, right? People have a skill, they're a specialist, they can roll on a die 20 or percent of the dice or whatever. But that always leaves the rest of the party just sitting there. And I think that mechanic works as long as it doesn't take a half an hour to play it out. right? To get to inside the computer and get the information. If that doesn't take a long time, then I guess that's fine. But I wanted something that was immersive, like a virtual reality type thing, where you transition from your meat space game into something inside of a computer, like a virtual reality, and you have some sort of mission to fulfill. And 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 the only way that works, I think, this is my hypothesis, is that everybody goes in to the computer to do the work, to adventure to the location, to the server, or wherever the information is, and find it and get it back out. Because otherwise, in like a cyberpunk game, if the net runner's got to run the net, everybody's like, it's time for a smoke break, because this is going to take, I don't know, 15 minutes or 30 minutes to resolve the hacker hacking the mainframe to get the information.
Unless you abstract things out more.
Right.
And so if the hacking is no different than a lot of other things that you do, maybe including combat, it shouldn't take much more time. But I think, but to actually get to feel like you're breaking through the ice, you're making these choices, and you've got all the, I think the more you go into like the I don't know if a good term, like hardware porn kind of stuff, like the more you get into that, the more complex it is, the more difficult it is. But the more it's just abstracted, like opening a door or whatever, I think it becomes easier. It just depends that experience that a person's wanting.
Right. Yeah. And so, like, the experience I wanted was like a little more abstract, but still like you're inside this new world essentially, and you have a mission that's got to be fulfilled inside of here, and you might go out back into the reality afterwards, or maybe your whole game that you want to play is just inside of a computer, right? So like Tron.
So is the idea that the whatever you're trying to do, the missions you would do, it would vary up the kind of worlds that you would experience?
Yeah. Each adventure could be essentially different, right? Each experience inside the network, inside the computer space or whatever, could be completely separate, different.
So you've abstracted the actual net running into a like an adventure.
Yep. And everybody just kind of can go in and do it. So there's, you could run a program, like not you, but a program that's specialized for the environment. So there's 5 classes in Netcrawl, or you could still just run as, Grok the Sentinel from an MCC, game, right? As I'm just a Sentinel. I've got, maybe your weapons are kind of also transferred with you into the virtual realms, or you're a shaman, or you're inside, cyberpunk. You could just be, there's the guy who's a hacker and he's here, he's got all his skills, but also the street samurais with him, and also all these different kind of archetypes.
So does the setting that they're in change, but their archetypes stay the same?
It could. No, that's an interesting point. Like the guy who's running a street samurai, could just decide that he wants to run like a caster while he's inside the net. It's just a character.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
There's no rules as far as like what you want to do inside there. You just have to kind of pick what your persona is. It could be you, it could be something else. It doesn't matter.
And I guess really with that kind of conceit, and since you're dealing with things that are online in nature, you could do like a West Marches, where people are just gathering, and it can be from anywhere, because it could just be, this is have you ever played Dice Heist?
No.
It's a very fun D6 game. It's very quick, but the idea is you can try and roll to get things, or you could take a D6, and those D6 is equal henchmen that you've accumulated, and you don't have to use them. But when you do use them for success, the ones that were used for that roll all go away.
Okay.
But the idea is they got the payoff and they leave. It's like, this is kind of similar kind of thing. You could just have a same party, or you could theoretically just say, hey, we got a mission. I know there's some stuff I know a guy.
Yeah.
In he could be in Singapore, he could be in Nairobi, or he could be in Boise, Idaho.
Right. Yeah. And I don't know if this is interesting to people or not, but like computers run super fast, right? They do, millions of calculations per second, per millisecond. So if that's true, could you have a virtual reality game or session, essentially a whole episode of your campaign take place inside of a computer, but it only takes like 10 minutes in the real world?
Well, if you could speed up your consciousness.
Right.
And maybe there's drugs for that.
Maybe there is drugs for that. But to have everybody jack in, do something in the span of like a turn, and then be able to come out and kind of pick up right where you left off of.
Or maybe we do, as you said, a time limit.
Sure.
But you can increase the time limit by taking these drugs. But by taking these drugs,
yes,
there's nothing better than to put things to your players that they willingly will do to potentially ruin their characters. And they do it willingly. They want to do it. And you say,
I like it.
If you do this drug, you get an extra 10 turns this adventure, which may help you get this heist done in time.
I like it. I like that a lot. Yeah, I think there's a lot you can do to play with, like worlds within worlds and time and all sorts of stuff, and you don't really have to like take a break from your campaign, as it were, to do it. Like, oh, we're gonna play a new game now. No, we're still in the same game. Your same characters are here, or they're kind of off stage for a minute, but they're now interacting in this different place.
So this also could be like Westworld.
Sure.
So you could just be Old West.
Oh yeah.
It could be
it's riffs, basically. I hate to say that, but you basically have the ability to do anything you want because the computers can do that for you.
Well, I was thinking, like, can you do like Breaking Bad, where you tell things a different way?
Sure.
Or a telenovela.
Could you imagine, like, you're in the middle of a cyberpunk campaign and then you're doing a telenovela for like
exactly
3 sessions or something?
You gotta be able to seduce this person so many rounds in order for this to work.
That'd be a trip, though.
Well, that's fun. So you are using DCC, and you're using that for the mechanical framework for resolution.
Yeah. At the moment I'm a freelance, writer for Goodman Games. So I've been churning out a bunch of stuff for them, and I really do like the system. And I've got lots of other stuff that are written in the same system that kind of are adjacent to Netcrawl. So it's like, do I want to just start over? God, no. There's already, so many game systems and all that other stuff. I was just like, I couldn't imagine. Like, first of all, deciding that I'm going to write a new setting because it doesn't exist, or it's not exactly what I want to see, or that I have seen. That's a step that I never thought I would take. And then to also say I'm going to write my own mechanics system is, in addition to all that, I was just like, that's a hard pass.
Yeah, well, you can use pre-existing ones. There's a number of systems that are out there.
Sure.
But I think the problem is that, like, for instance, I think if it were me and it was, I think I would go with Cortex Plus, except I don't think anybody's playing it anymore. and I don't think they have an SRD available, and it's going to be an uphill battle. But I think as far as playing that kind of conceptual game, it would sing, but it's just, but you're not going to sell that many, so
No.
it's going to be sad. So I think by doing something that's established, and with Goodman Games, one is you have a good community that supports people doing stuff,
Right.
but you also have Joseph Goodman, who will also buy a certain number of copies.
Yep.
So you can at least, as long as you fund, you can at least figure you can break even, unless you go crazy on your budget.
Right. And there's like a lot of like cross genre or like multi-genre. Like there's already, the community is just super deep in exploring all the corners, right, of kind of the gaming genres already.
Yeah, even superheroes now.
Yeah, they got superheroes, got Gam World, got Weird West. You got, it's just, the list goes on and on and on. It seems like every year somebody's putting out some kind of, like, at least a fledgling setting inside the DCC, system.
And I think it's kind of interesting. On one hand, people can make the argument, it's like, trying to force systems sometimes into things they weren't originally ran for sometimes is fraught. But I think on the other hand, it forces they can develop a new way of thinking about things, and there's a lot of benefit to those activities.
Yeah, and I think DCC hits a really good sweet spot in providing a structure and not a lot of like rules, right? So it covers the basics well enough that you can fiddle around with the mechanics. You can do experiments inside of what is quote unquote the rules, and just kind of expand it however you see fit.
Yeah, because I had the guy who did the superheroes, I forget his name now, on but he was enamored with the dice chain and thought it was an underutilized mechanic. So it's like, so you have these opportunities for mechanics that are in the system already baked in, and then all you're going to do is kind of is put it more in the forefront and not really have to write anything new, but be able to utilize what's there in a way that gives the feel for what you need.
Yeah. I think the genius of the book is it's comprehensive, in how it covers the material, the idea of an RPG, but doesn't like put a bunch of manacles around you when you use it.
Yeah, it's and I think it's again, it's well loved by so many people. So there's it seems like, I say, supportive wise, it makes a lot of sense, especially with being very, very familiar with the system.
Yeah,
I think going into DCC, it's like, no matter what my experience is to write for anything for DCC is pretty. Yeah, I definitely want somebody who knows what they're doing to edit it, because it is its own thing.
it is its own thing. There are great things to leverage, and if you fail to leverage it, it'll still work. But
well, like for
those set
instance,
pieces are great.
I thought about, like, weren't taking a Lankmar module and then adventure and then using it for another system, and then they did stuff like they made a lock impossible basically to pick, which is a absolute terrible thing to do. Except you don't want something that when you roll and you fail, the adventure stops. But
Right.
there's an introductory adventure. You can start burning luck and burning stats, which is integral for part 2 DCC.
Yep.
And then you're like, ooh, what they're doing here does not port well.
Right.
Like, you'd have to definitely, like, you may not even, that was written for introductory to teach people how to use that. You'd have to change so much just to make it even well, you wouldn't even necessarily want to put it in there like that at all.
Right.
Elsewhere, and you have to think how you'd want to handle that differently.
Yeah, for sure. Right. There's definitely some parts that won't translate back out. Like you could get stuff in pretty easily,
Yes.
but getting it back out's hard.
Because the ability to burn stats and burn luck and all that stuff is, so what I love about it is, again, it is a way for, because the dice are swingy,
Yeah.
and it's very not fun at times. But if you want it bad enough, you can
Yes.
erode your character to
Yes.
get a success.
That's true.
It's up to you. Nobody's forcing you to do that, but
That's
it's
true.
always there on the table.
I think if it does end at that point, right? Like you're saying, like it's this point where like the adventure can't go forward.
Yeah.
Well, it's a chance to kind of redesign it if you take it back out to, right. If you do want to take it to another system.
And why
like,
the point was, again, is like the whole point was to do this thing. And if you
right.
don't do that thing, then like, you're having a lock there. In my mind, you'd have to have, if it's possible for somebody to fail a lockpick roll, you need to have other ways of getting in it.
Yeah.
Besides lockpicking, or have a way of getting it, but now it's at some sort of cost, whatever that may be.
Right.
So like, for instance, I think like secret doors, I haven't done a lot, but I think one fun way is if you have a secret door and somebody fails to find it or fails to open it, just have a random encounter come walking through the door and attack them. So they still get it. They fail. There's a cost to failure,
Gotcha.
but they still get the secret door.
Yeah, that makes sense.
But I don't know. It's kind of hard to think. So, but anyway, that's the tricky thing. I think it's easy to think things are the same, but there's a lot of nuggety things that are good stuff that Joseph baked into the system that are really pretty smart. And even the dice chain, I've not played that much DCC. I only play at conventions, but the stuff is just a lot of fun to play.
Yeah, I've been thinking about for Netcrawl and I played around with it in a couple Patreon posts and some of the work, that's kind of in the book. It's like, I want to get, like, I don't want it limited to DCC world. Like, I love DCC. I love what that's brought to the table by that system. But I would love it if if you were in Mothership and then, for some reason you've got to interact with this horrifying ship computer at the end, or something like that, where everybody kind of goes in or interacts in a digital space rather than in the meat space, or things like Gamma World, right? That's not it's adjacent-ish, and probably not too hard to transfer between it was a THACO system, wasn't it, in the first edition? And DCC, I don't think that would be too hard. But I really think that I want a toolkit around Netcrawl that you can kind of transfer your characters in, I guess, and also go back out.
The hard part is, I think the key to Mothership is probably, and I may be misspeaking, so just me as I think it is they have, I think, a stress and a horror mechanic.
Yeah.
And so that's the hard part of porting that in, is those are two mechanics that could work very well within Netcrawl, but they don't necessarily have anything quite comparable, I think, with DCC.
Right. Yeah. Well, anytime you were going to port systems, there's going to be some work. I can get you part the way there, right? But I probably can't solve every problem in every system.
No, I think, I think that's where it becomes hard to be system neutral unless you're dealing with this. It's like, I think you can be like system neutral for like D&D adjacent stuff, but it's hard to then jump into other streams as well.
Yeah. Certainly learning a few things along the way. Like, I've avoided this so far. Like, I think I've done one conversion to Troikia from DCC, and for House of the Red Doors. and I've never really felt like it was. I mean, it's fun. It was a fun experience to kind of learn that system and play around with it and translate an adventure into it. But again, the fantasy adjacent, right? It's easier to kind of deal with that because the it's the same kind of situations. It's not like computer hacking. Um, and so I've never done it with another one of my games ever, or adventures or supplements or anything. Like when OSE came out, I was like, I should do some stuff in there. I was like, I ain't got time for that.
Yeah, so I've looked through an adventure somebody wrote for a uh for convention play, and the stuff they had was kind of conversion from fifth edition, but it's like all the characters, the characters that you hand out, they were all at max hit points. The it's like there's a lot of things. This is like that's not generally what the OSE experience is
right.
to have. Yeah, it's like it's usually the opposite.
Right.
And I think that
I got a hit point.
Yeah, so somebody's wanting to highlight their setting and the cool things about their setting, and they want the people playing to be able to go through that ride, so to speak, and see all those touch points. But they also beat them up to make sure that they could. But when I look back at a lot of their conversions, even for their book, it's like they have certain monsters having the state about grappling. Now there's no grappling rules in OSC. Here in an OSC supplement, they talk about using grappling for the monsters. I'm like, I don't think you really,
happens.
Yes. Well, it can happen, but there's no guidelines for it. You can't just say
totally different.
This happens and you're grappled. Well, what does that mean? Because you better define grappled, because the books don't define grappled.
Right. No doubt. I was on the Dungeon Denizens project for Goodman Games, and that was kind of like requires a mind twist as well. You get this fifth edition monster, and you're thinking like, okay, they're really big into monster stat blocks that are various protections and immunities and all damage resistances and all this other stuff and also like damage types. Everything's got to be typed.
Yeah.
And then the advice you get kind of from your developer on the DCC side of the house is like, forget all that crap.
Yeah.
You can say something about fire, but you don't have to like label everything that's fire type damage or acid damage or all this other stuff. Forget about all that. And I think the other thing too is like the stats. They stat all the monsters out in 5th edition, and like don't worry about that stuff. Just kind of remember they have typically higher ACs in DCC, and they have lower hit points. I think that's kind of how it goes. But so it's just like you need to put some thought into the conversion. It's not just like, oh, everything works exactly as you might think it does when you go from system to system.
Right. No. And the experiences are so, like, for instance, the lower armor class and higher hit points gives people more satisfaction of hitting more often, but toughens up the creatures.
Right.
But when you start saying your characters have low hit points and every hit will kill you, one hit can kill you even up to probably 3rd level. Then your method of play is a lot different than it is with OSE than it is with 5th edition.
Right.
You hire henchmen as many as your charisma will allow you, and as much money as you got. So you go in the dungeon with 18 people.
A blade of people armor.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so it's rather than being a heroic person going in, you're actually being you start a business, and you're doing the actuarial tables, and you're figuring out, okay,
this place seems pretty dangerous. We're going to need at least twice the henchmen as we had last time.
And so what that does is it turns OSE into that becomes a mini game. So it's you got this little management of NPCs that you're hiring. So and it's not better or worse. It's to blindly go in and think it's the same. It isn't. It feels different. And
Right.
whichever direction you go into.
Isn't that funny though? It's its own mini game.
Yes.
Right. And like maybe stats in DCC is its own mini game. Right. You're playing with this resource, which is character stats, and that's the mini game.
Oh yeah. Yeah, no, those little mini games are fun. I mean, everybody has them. Sometimes it's just character creation for some is the mini game, but anyway, it's just it's funny because we do come to those differences for experiences, and those mechanics should support those experiences.
Yeah, no doubt.
And I know people have gone from 5th edition style to old school essentials and not like it. It's like I'm dead.
What, I have to make a new one again?
Yes.
Well, I like this guy.
It's like it's pretty crazy.
Here's my 1-page backstory.
Yeah, in fact, yeah. In fact, yeah, they were like I'm actually using have you ever played I only ran one session of it so far, but if you run Cities Without Number or Stars Without Number?
No, I've paged through, I think, Stars Without Number.
So you have even fewer hit points than you do with Old School Essential. So you start with a D6 at best. And so so somebody swinging a D8 sword all of a sudden just becomes very ugly, or a D10. It's like or first level. Like, yeah. That's what
I guess as long as it's easy to make a character, then
as long as it's that's the thing, especially if you do not so much with the Cities Without Number, but the different Old School Essentials. There's probably a lot of generators out there. You can just keep hitting the button.
Right.
So what things
there are a lot of like
there's a lot of what?
There's a lot of classes in OSE, and it keeps kind of growing, like even since like the advanced fantasy or whatever.
Yeah, I think
like everyone's piling on in that space.
Well, I think I could be wrong. I think the advance was mainly to make it align with Advanced Dungeons and Dragons,
right,
and be able to play some other races or species,
right,
whatever they call them for Old School Essentials. Yeah, I mean, it is kind of interesting, the bare bones, but then the still adding on of stuff. But I think they've kind of kept a lot of that creep from going too far.
At least at the official level, right? There's tons of people writing supplements.
Yeah, but that's our nature.
Yeah, I guess that's true.
It's like, because I got friends that Planar Crumpus, and they're just they're doing interdimensional kind of oddness, so they're adding mentalist abilities and all sorts of other stuff. But I don't know.
Got to get it out on paper, right?
It is kind of strange that it's almost, to me, almost like I don't say vision quest, but I got to do this. I got this idea in my head. I got to do it.
Got to happen.
Yeah, I don't know why. Until I get it out, it's not going to leave me alone.
So true.
It's like it is strange. It's not always pleasant. I don't know. Maybe for you it's pleasant. I don't know. I find it sometimes just
I think I like it. I think everybody's different on how they approach kind of like adding on to systems. But I like to think that I try not to mess around with the core too much, like in the supplements that I have over the years.
But as far as not just supplements, but just there's an idea that you have, and it's got to come out.
Oh well, yes. Well, I enjoy the process. I enjoy the writing, so for me, that's part of it. Just stringing clever sentences together is fun just in itself, and getting to kind of like and reading and kind of like mining that material for content, I think is also kind of enjoyable. So like is it compulsive that it has to come out? I don't know, but I think it's more like I see there's something missing. Like it may not be missing, but like to me, it's missing. Let's just put it that way. And then I'm sure there's got to be at least one other person who probably feels the same way. That there's some aspect of the design that's missing, um, and so that's what I try to kind of get out there. It's like that's the thing I want to concentrate on, like dwarves and magic, like in DCC. Take that for instance. Right?
There's not dwarves in magic.
Nope, you're a dwarf. You can do mighty deeds. You got a sword and a weapon, and that's it. I mean, there's some other stuff, but like, there's not a caster. You can't become a wizard dwarf. I guess you could. You could make it up.
Well, I think it comes down to, because it really, I guess once you start adding that kind of stuff, you're not. I don't know what Justice Goodman's intentions were, but with, I think advanced D&D, you had that possibility, but going back, there was not, that wasn't kind of like an archetype that that dwarves are associated with.
Right. You played the dwarf who just had a suite of dwarven abilities, and that was it. Right. And so to say like he can cast magic, or he can, like, here's the thing, right? Is like you always think of the dwarf as making a magical weapon. Well, how do they do that? Right? Like they have to be a caster. That's what a place you can go in the analysis is say like, well, if the dwarves can't cast magic, then how can they make magic weapons? Because all the mechanics around making magic weapons, so you have to have enchant sword or whatever in order to do the stuff. And so how do you square those two things? And maybe, that's one way to do it. Say now they have to be casters, but could you just kind of make up something different that supports them being able to make magic weapons, but not have it being casters? And that's where I would tend to go that direction.
Yeah.
And say, I want to make some mechanics or some way for dwarves to explain why dwarves can make magical weapons, not make them into casters.
Oh, right. Me too. Because it could just be that there's something innate about them, or their gods bless them in a certain way, or maybe magic is maybe like folk magic less than like arcane magic.
Right. We're like ritual in nature, right?
Yeah, exactly.
They're not going to sit there and cast spells in a few seconds. They're going to take months to draw this energy into the weapon.
Right. It could be the rituals or the prayers during the entire process.
Right.
And the purity of the person doing it and their devotion to the god Hammerich or whatever.
And their innate skill, right? And working the metal and like creating alloys and drawing, properties out of just the material science of it all. That's magic, isn't it?
Well, I think so. I think what's happened, what is that to me, is like there's a lot of, if magic was real and deities are real, there's all these spells that are related to combat. There should be 10 times as many things that aren't related to combat.
Right.
But there's no thought to that.
No. Right. It's like sword magic spell, dwarves, ergo dwarves must be magic users.
Yeah. It's like,
no.
If you looked at RuneQuest?
Oh boy. No, well, it's got to be a million years since I looked at RuneQuest.
Yeah, so I'm not well steeped in it, but the idea is it is like magic all around, but it's not a high fantasy, but it's like if you were to go to the like not using a pejorative way, but like the pagan view of the world was real, and magic is kind of part of the world, but it's not high fantasy,
right?
Then it's like that's how that world operates. The world is a disc. It's like, it's not, all these things, there is a God that is the sun that flies across, and things work because that's part of the way the world is.
Right. It's not like, it's not observable to like the naked eye.
Yeah.
Right.
But it's also part of the people, it's part of their life and things that they do. It's not just a
Yeah.
fireball, fireball, fireball,
Right.
type thing.
Yeah. They believe in it deeply. Everybody.
Yes, because all the deities are real, and
Yes.
it affects people's lives in a way that's like, like the deities are well fleshed out. It's not simply just pick a random god. It's you're really tied to whatever deities you're tied to,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
it has implications.
Feel like there's been a lot of really good Norse themed shows, historical fiction shows where like these people are like deeply invested in like the nature, the Norse gods and curses and divination and all sorts of stuff. They believed in it and therefore it existed, but like it's not observable. Like they're throwing stuff on the ground, or they're all these things, issuing curses, um, all sorts of superstitions, uh, and those are all still game mechanicable if you want them to be.
Yeah, it's just they're not as flashy. I think it's because we came from the war game environment.
Yes, Tolkien, right? Like big fireballs, boom.
You shall not pass.
Yes, it's exciting. That's the fantasy heritage. So we got to lean into it, I guess.
Yeah, but it's kind of things like blights and cursing of crops and things that really impacts a kingdom. Those things really don't seem to really show up.
I love that DCC puts them in kind of like in there, like they can be grown. But issuing curses is like a core part of the Appendix N reading, and it's in there,
Right.
very prominently, right? Like I don't think maybe DCC takes advantage of it enough, in the context of the modules, right? Like
Yeah, I was reading. A friend of mine was reading Jack Vance, and I guess somebody provoked a wizard till they got cursed, but they already had another curse, and apparently, when you have two curses, one cancels out the other. So the whole idea was to get the wizard to curse him, so he could get himself rid of the other curse. So I think if you can make curses both something that players don't want, something that can be removed,
yes,
but also then adventurable, then that could be fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. I worked on Dying Earth project for Goodman Games, and say they added a bunch of curses. I got to write one or two, I can't remember, but that was a fun thing to kind of like get into of that part of the game. Is like, okay, we need like two curses or whatever it was they asked me to do, and so to kind of read up and research what was there, do more research, like kind of the world of curses and that kind of stuff, and then to write up some new ones in the Dying Earth kind of milieu was a fun assignment, and I think it's underutilized in some of the.
Yeah, I think too is like, I think there are some things that like you can do narratively, but like mechanically, like I think going back like the old school essentials, going back to BX has the reaction table. So it's simple as just saying -1 to your reaction table. May not be a big deal short term, but long term that could be something you're like, I need to get this off my.
Yeah. That's great. Yeah, you should do that.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of opportunities to do fun, interesting things, and it's kind of even looking at like sword and sorcery. Trying to look at magic differently. It's kind of challenging coming out in light of like D&D, where you want the magic to kind of have a different feel.
I think D&D puts a lot of emphasis in having like this cohesive mechanical thing, right? Like it somehow the inputs always work I don't know, the same. You know what I'm saying? Like there's this overriding desire to have a ton of mechanics and then interleave them with each other. And then it becomes problematic when you start doing that. And I don't know where I was going with that, but that was like popped into my head. It's like D&D is like all these mechanics that are like kind of competing with each other and running into each other and basically causing a headache.
Yeah, but I think the thing is that they don't always narratively make sense,
Right.
and they don't really care about doing the same thing, meshing things in a way that narratively makes sense.
Right.
And even going back to religion, it just doesn't make sense. I mean, a lot of the stuff just doesn't make sense. But I guess we will forgo that. And I think they also, I think where Joseph Goodman went was to make magic more unpredictable.
Yes. Which I love. I love that.
Yeah.
And even if you don't use like DCC, I think that there's a lot to be plumbed out of that exercise of doing a spell in like 10 different boxes, right? You can always decompose those into spells in your own campaign, right? You can still make them Vankian in the fact of the spell result is spell X, which is just another flavor of this spectrum, right, of magic. And they do that with like the easy example is invisibility in DCC translates out to like 4 or 5 different invisibility spells in D&D, right? It's like invisibility, improved invisibility, mass invisibility, improved mass invisibility. Those are all in that one table, that one spell check table.
Well, I was also thinking too, through, and I've mentioned this podcast before, but like like you take the original, like I can't remember who did the comparison, but like take the original write up for the light spell. And then through each edition, they keep adding these restrictions to it because they're answering to abuses that players are doing and the need to constrain it. Right. You could do that likewise. You could reverse that whole thing with each edition. Until finally, yes, you can cast it in somebody's face and they are permanently blinded, and until they,
That's a really interesting idea. It's like decompose that into its own kind of like higher level light spells, right? That are like,
yeah,
that's a cool idea. I like that.
Yeah. So it's not like you. So what sort of projects do you normally work on, or what has been your direction
for Goodman Games, or just personally?
This in general.
Just in general. I vacillate between fantasy and kind of like Cthulhu fantasy. I always like those two together, and then this kind of computer stuff. So I've been writing a lot of support material for MCC around computers. So taking the spells from DCC and turning them into technological kind of programs, result checks still on that program table list, just like the MCC shaman might do, right? He activates a program. So doing that treatment of DCC spells as something that could be used in MCC, or games like Cyber Sprawl Classics or Space Crawl or Crawl Jammer, all these third-party projects, which are all have computer kind of aspects to them. So I split my time between fantasy and then like kind of computer topics, which is my day job is I'm in the computer software industry, architect, software architect, solution architect. So I've had many years of thinking about computers and on a practical professional level to kind of bring into gameplay.
Yeah, so that's kind of interesting. So that kind of does explain some ways the idea of you say the cyberpunk, because it does kind of fit very adjacent to where you're at with me. There's no such there's no such interesting intersection of manufacturing and any sort of role playing games.
Yeah, I suppose that's true. There's not a lot of construction or manufacturing based role playing games.
No,
so they make a fine setting for some adventures, I'm sure.
There must be a bird somewhere.
The dog?
Yes.
Oh, that's
Yeah,
funny.
I don't know what she'd do if she even saw one or actually got a hold of one. But table's going up. Yeah, it's there we go. Yeah, that was kind of crazy. Yeah, it's the and especially now with artificial intelligence being at the forefront with with the with Mid Journey and with also with the Chat GPT. I'm sure that comes more into play now with in people's minds.
It's going to be a big shift. I don't know if it's a good one, but it's going to be a big shift.
Oh, it is. It is. I think it it is. I don't think it's going to be as apocalyptical as people imagine, but it's definitely going to, I think, have it's going to definitely affect people's jobs.
Yeah. I mean, at this stage, I still consider it a bit of a parlor trick. The, the whole idea. It's not intelligence per se.
No.
It's a very clever and deep set of data that it can kind of reference and regurgitate. And that's not intelligence. That's just a program.
Yeah, and I think there's going to be stuff where it's going to demonstrate itself to be very adept and very welcomed, and there's other areas it's going to probably fall flat.
Right. No doubt.
There's a lot of people, I think, companies looking at saving money
Yeah.
directly, but I don't think that's gonna start panning out like they want.
No, I don't think it will. I mean, it's already apparent, right, that it's kind of not what it's billed to be. Like it can get you part the way there, but it can fall victim to just outright bad misinformation synthesis.
Yes, again. And the thing is, it's so emphatic in presenting that false synthesis as truth.
Right.
It's like,
Yeah, um there's a lot to be done in the space. It can't, it has to have a very, to be useful, it has to have a very strict and almost kind of mechanical outcome. The output you want to be um essentially mechanical. Like if you want to know someone has cancer or something like that, right? Like that's a mechanical thing. That's not an open to interpretation.
right.
Art and literature and argument and rhetoric, those are subjective, and 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 that's not where it's going to work out.
So, like, for instance, I work for a company. We have these prints, and each of the prints has specification numbers, and we've got hundreds or thousands of specification numbers, but each print has a specified number, and they can be a varying level of complexity, covering from how brand identity goes to metallurgical to tolerancing to whatever. I could see where you could take the Chat GPT, have this limited data set,
Yeah.
and be able to ask it a common language, easy, normal speaking level questions, and have it be able to spit stuff out without having to read through all this specifications and be able to just even give references where it got the information from. I can see that being superbly welcome. I mean, it'd be definitely be welcomed by everybody. And I think I'm hoping that's where this does lead is being able to be able to search through sets of information, be able to sift through it, and be able to provide solid answers. Less of that, more of that, than less of write a book for me.
Yeah. It's got to be the worst use of the idea. Like let's replace something that people enjoy and let a computer do it.
Yeah, I do know that for me, I have used, I do use, I've used Mid Journey to generate images to hand to artists to say, I want something like this.
Mm-hmm.
That's been helpful, but is it better than just going through Pinterest and doing the same thing? I don't know.
It's it's funny because even like it's changing, even like free royalty free art websites, right? In that you almost distrust whatever's in there now. You don't know if it was just generated by a prompter or if it was actually created by a person. I think it's kind of left utilizing some of those services as like, you don't want to touch it.
I'm pretty sure there's a not highly well known, but a kind of well known artist in RPG circles putting out a project. I started looking at it, and I'm pretty certain that he was using Chat GPT, just because there's those weird artifacts of like all around that were not cleaned up, and it's just like that's where it's becoming difficult. So it's
I'm
like
definitely not going there. I'm definitely
it,
not going there.
in looking at it also looking at, I've even have put out art requests through Upwork, and people have, I said, hey, I got this much budget, I'm looking for this kind of project. I've had artists send me very definite my son's doing some baking for 4-H. He used Chat GPT article or generated images, submitted them, and said, these are Chat GPT, but I can do something like this. Just pick which Chat GPT image you want, and I'll do something like that. I'm like, I don't think so. If that's your portfolio, is Chat GPT stuff you generated off some prompts that I could have just done myself? It's like, I don't.
Yeah, that's it. It's muddying the water everywhere, isn't it?
It
Like the
is.
whole presence of generative AI is just making it harder to pull together a project.
Yeah, and I saw somebody had also posted something once on Facebook as an image of a comic book character, and people were thumbs upping it and all excited about it. And I started looking at it. It's like, this is a really bad Mid-Journey image. And there's so many telltale signs, but I thought, you know what? Most people just can't tell the difference, even if it's obvious that this is, from multiple ways, this is not, an actual person doing it, but I don't know.
I'm hoping we'll kind of wake up. I don't
I think
know.
I think there's going to be, I think what's going to happen is, I think it's still going to be a combination of things. I think what will happen is, I think in some ways, regular artists are going to be utilizing it, but maybe not necessarily to do images directly. But there probably will get to be a point where they will start using it for references,
Right.
and for certain portions inside their in their images.
Right. I can see that. Like reference material is always an important, component of doing art, right? You want a model to work off of, for instance, right? So
Yeah, and maybe it's something like a flock of birds in the distance, and maybe you want to, it's just a small amount of visual imagery, but you want something like that. That'd be probably very easy for, for doing a transparent background, and for
yeah,
AI to generate something like that. I don't know.
yeah, no doubt. I mean, I can't. I guess it means, I think maybe in the short term, it means you've got to really keep your friends close, your art friends close, and keep giving them work.
Well, there's a
Because
fellow
you know
who
them.
There's a fellow who hired an artist, and the person used AI to generate the art, even though the guy said he didn't. And people started calling out this guy who was just a small-time novelist, calling it out. And he's like, no, no, no. And finally, the guy admitted, yeah, he was using an AI art the whole time for that cover. And it was just such a mess.
Yeah, yeah. Keep your relationships with your artist strong. Like I like. I'm glad, that I've been doing this a while and I have people I can go to who I know, what they're capable of and how they can the timelines they execute on, all sorts of stuff. I would really hate to be starting out right now and trying to navigate this minefield.
Well, you working with Goodman as close as you have, that does provide you a lot of contacts, and but I'll tell you, coming from my direction, it's been more challenging.
I could see that. I think it gets back to this we were talking about earlier, like we're a community, right, of publishers, and if we're not like talking to each other, on just the aspirate, the production kind of parts of doing this, you're putting yourself at a bit of a disadvantage, right? Like, because you don't have maybe as big as a artist pool to draw off of, and you're just trying to find your artists. And so I think it gets back to this an excellent point you made, that like we have to kind of get out of the shells a little bit and talk to each other and share resources.
Well, what I was also finding is, especially what's very affordable, is a lot of the stock art, that not stock art, but yeah, it's like stock art you can buy from various artists. But what I've been finding is that other people use those same artists, and
Yes.
then it starts becoming very like it's like
Yes, I've seen this one before. I think I've got one of the covers. I pulled this out of stock art, like a stock art, like Shutterstock or something like that. But I've seen that on literally, I don't know, 4 or 5 different covers. I did a lot of like recoloring and like and retouching of mine. Mine's in a different color scheme, but I've seen the same like cyber skeleton with like a yellow background and kind of this, see, kind of a greenish skull, or I can't remember, and like red wires. But I've seen that literally, I don't even know on how many books, like 5 or 6 books, and then I've used it on mine. But I mean, I changed the colors, but that's about all I could really do with it.
yeah, it's definitely very challenging, and I'm thankful for people that have gotten to the point where they're that successful. But I also mentioned my podcast, right? For Gary's Appendix 1, I used Peculiar Ruins for a cover, worked out great. And then wasn't maybe a couple months later, I saw someone else doing a zine using that same image for a cover, and it was like, I'll never ever do that again. Do not use stock art for your cover. It's like, unless you can make adjustments, because you have no control over who else does the same thing.
Right, no doubt. Yeah, you're quite right. Like, and it's expensive to commission a cover.
Yes, it is.
It's going to start at like $500, 400, $500.
Yeah, I've been able to get between it varies between 200 and 500.
Yep, I feel like that's about the same.
It just depends on who's doing it. I've also found that people who are, if you go through Upwork and get people that are like professional artists, when I say professional artists, I mean people that make their living off of the art rather than doing it as a side. Those people, at least my small experience, they have quick turnarounds. They're pretty on the ball, because that's they're incentivized.
Yeah. Yeah, going back to the DCC hookups, it's nice to be able to get Doug Kovacs to do a cover, or Stephen Poag to do a cover.
Oh yeah, yeah. It's kind of interesting. I mean, they have defined as far as I can tell, as an outsider, they've really kind of defined the whole vibe of, I think, I know their art's not the entirety, but they definitely have helped to create that weird vibe.
Yeah, that's part of the signature, right, of the books. Is like,
yeah,
you see, a handful of artists right on that cover, and they're great. Every single one is like kind of, they're all nice, amazing pieces.
Yeah, and I think it's kind of going back to, and their system matches. Right, D&D had a lot of different artists, but the art didn't necessarily match the game.
Mm-hmm.
So like Earl Otis, I think, is my favorite artist, but none of the D&D systems actually matched the feeling of Earl Otis's artwork.
No, they don't.
That's a game I want to play.
Yeah. I'm wondering, he did a bunch of the DCC Dying Earth covers for these modules. He even wrote one. So I'm curious to see. I think I've gotten to play a couple of them out of the release, and they're, I think maybe they match.
Yeah, and I think definitely with it seems like DCC with the mechanics has decided to lean into more the unpredictable and the odd,
Yes, yes,
rather, rather
yes,
than the Larry Elmore covers of high fantasy.
for real. Yeah, it's definitely like weird fantasy, sci-fi fantasy.
And things can go really well or
Can go
things can
any
go really
direction.
bad.
Yeah, can go any direction.
So when you play the magic users, because I know that you can, as you roll that D20 and you add those numbers and you can kind of go up in categories of spell.
Yeah.
It sounds like some people play it kind of soft where you can choose as a person playing the caster, you can choose any level up to the point where you roll. But I think some have also stated it's what you roll is what you get.
Yeah, usually unless the spell rules is written or whatever, unless the spell specifies you can take a lower result, you generally are stuck where you are. You could go up by spending luck. I don't think I've ever heard anyone say, although I wouldn't, I wouldn't kick them out of the table if they said I want to use luck to go down. But in theory, you know, that's just a table ruling at that point. But rules is written, it's like the roll is the roll. It can go up with luck. It can, if it says it can go down, you can pick a lower result. You can do it. There's also a mercurial magic effect that will let you pick the spell check result.
I like the idea of when the mage is ready to cast a spell, everybody just flees.
In a game where the caster, like, he wanted a high result and he put some points in it, and then
Yeah.
he rolled a natural 20.
Yeah.
So it went straight to the end of the table, and it was Armageddon. The
Yeah.
spell basically Armageddon. Killed him. It killed him. Boom.
That's the kind of game I want to play in.
Yeah. I think it was a patron, invoke patron. So the patron like blew up all the people and then like blew him up too or something like that. And it's like, I'm sorry.
See, to me, that's fun. It's fun
Yes.
because there's a bit of, if you look at just the gaming, there's a mini game there. It's a push of your luck mechanic, and those push your luck mechanics they can be so very, very, very fun if you get the right
Yes.
table.
Yes. Yes. I mean, everybody's like, dying, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Everyone's
As a GM, you can prompt them on like, this is the boss. You may want to burn some more points, or it's up to you. But just saying,
that mini game. Going back, it's a mini game. It's its
yeah.
own mini game.
And there's nothing
Embrace
wrong
that
with
mini
those.
game. The chaos game. Embrace that chaos. Press your luck. Stat spending mini game.
Yeah, and I think that's definitely. I don't know where he came up with that idea, but I think it's definitely been a genius move.
It makes for a lot of fun at a table. It's way more exciting to cast Magic Missile at a DCC table than to cast it at a D&D table.
Yes, yeah, and what it's fun is when you can make a roll and everybody's looking. Like it's like everybody has their attention and they're invested in the outcome of that roll.
Exactly. Everybody's just baited, hanging on. Breaths are being held, seeing what comes down. And when
Yeah, is it going to fizzle, or are you going to take out the entire group, or is it somewhere in between? We don't know.
and you read off that spell result, and everyone's just like, yes.
That's pretty cool. So, how long have you been working for Goodman Games or doing freelance work?
How long?
Yeah.
I think the first project I was brought in for was Dying Earth. So that was like the end of was it the end of 22, I think. They reached out to me and said, "Hey, we got some extra stuff we need to do for Dying Earth. Do you want to write some spells and some curses and whatever?" And so that's when it started. I've been, doing third-party publishing and putting stuff out every year, a few books every year. So I was thrilled to to get invited inside the freelancer circle or whatever. And it's been worked on Dungeon Denizens. I've worked on Dying Earth. I've worked on the tournament, the Dying Earth tournament that's going to be at Gen Con. So I wrote part of that, and then some other stuff I can't talk about.
Yes.
But the work kind of keeps rolling in on kind of every 3 months or so something comes up that they kind of ask you for some extra work for. It's been a lot of fun.
It goes to show that if you're producing stuff on a regular basis and you're producing decent quality, people can notice, and then that can start creating opportunities to, if it's your desire to work for another company or do freelance work, it does open up doors.
And I think another kind of variable and all that, and I said it earlier, is asking. It's like, hey, I want to write for you guys. That was part of it too. I got turned down a couple times, or like, yeah, okay, cool, and it just didn't come until much later.
Well, you think about these people, I'm sure they lead very busy lives. There's a lot going on, and then when you may ask, they really don't need anybody, but if you happen to ask at a point of desperation, it's like we just had an artist flake or a writer flake out, or whatever. All of a sudden, we just need an extra 20,000 words. And everybody else is tapped out. And you come say, "Hey, can I do it?" You're like, "Sure." It's like,
yes, you've hit us at the right time.
Yeah, exactly. And then that's your opportunity to produce. And then if you do a decent job, then you provide it on time, then they're happy, and they'll ask you again.
That's very true. That is very true. I think if you look at the past couple of years, their kind of production schedule and the stuff they're putting out, it's been big projects, a lot of big projects. OAR, 2 OAR editions, Janelle Chakre's stuff, and then the Dying Earth project, and now Xcrawl is coming out, and the Dungeon Denizens project was all in the works, and so they got like every writer that's writing the adventures, are writing the books, the supplements, all this other stuff. Those dudes are working hard.
The
that they have are all probably at capacity.
Yeah, it's definitely you start dealing with those large projects. I can just imagine. I mean, my stuff's pretty small in scale, and it takes a fair amount of energy to keep things going. But when you start dealing with the other, there's a lot more on the line, and it's much more complex, especially when you're dealing with mechanics, rather than just writing, just stuff that's narrative in nature. Right.
I think another interesting part of kind of making this transition is like you get asked to do stuff that it's not in your wheelhouse, or it's not your passion, or all sorts. You're getting an assignment, right?
Right.
And that's, I haven't been ruminating over it for the past 6 months, right? And I want to get it out on paper. It's like now it's like perform, right, on command, this assignment, which is totally different than DIY.
You're right, and in that way it becomes, I guess, somebody's like a job. I mean, it's kind of like as a kid, it's like hard to find excitement of doing stuff, but to get a paycheck, you got to do stuff you don't like, and you got to produce, and you got to learn to turn it on, right?
Right. Like they asked me to do a manse for Dying Earth, and I was like, I've never done that, and I haven't been thinking about it for the past 6 months, so this is going to be hard.
So you did a manse?
I did one of the manses, one of the 3 manses. One of them's mine.
Oh, that's fun. So what do you put in a manse? What is hard about a manse?
It's just like if you think about Dying Earth, right? All these magicians have these kind of outre, strange places that they live in, like these geometric glass, or strange towers, or things that can, like the spaceships that kind of go into space, and so to kind of get into that level of, it's not just a wizard tower, it's a Dying Earth wizard's tower, which could be all sorts of fantastical, to kind of hit that tonal quality that lives up to like a Dying Earth a magician's abode is like a little different than make me a wizard tower.
Right.
You're dealing with Jack Vance here.
I've read some Vance, but I've never read any Dying Earth.
Oh, uh, that's definitely a favorite series. I also like the uh, was it the Green Pearl series or whatever, Lioness. Yes, that one's one of my favorites too.
Yeah, I need to rectify that. So once you've written up the Mance, you're done. Was there a feeling of liberation, maybe even emancipation?
Ooh, it was fun. I mean, that was a great project to kind of get thrusted on yourself onto me, and like I was happy with what I turned out. I thought it was fun. Obviously, they did too. So it's in the book.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting that how they break things up with the number of people, but I think it makes sense. I guess as long as you have a strong editors in place, you can keep the tone the same. I'd be kind of
Yeah,
concerned about that.
yeah, that's true. But even the core team is like two or three people, maybe more, for that core team. Um, so they already knew the problem in a sense of having multiple authors all playing in the same book. I think, I don't know, the Kickstarter exclusive box set, which is where all my work went into. I I think I did see some tonal differences or even some stat blocks differences. Um, so you're right. It's something that's hard to do, is to have that many people on a product and keep it all together.
Yeah, it's just I think unless you have somebody rewriting all of it, which is possible. When I say rewrite, I mean like heavily going through and doing it. I don't know how you would do that unless you just had people that were fairly similar to begin with.
Yeah, I don't know if part of it is choosing the right people to. I don't know if that's a component that I thought of. I wasn't inside the decisions, but like I had read the books, in love with the books, in love with Jack Vance, and so being able to like given a project where it's like you're carrying on this legacy, his legacy of the stuff he wrote, um, was a treat because you get to use all the big words.
Right.
You get to be loquacious and whatnot in your text. So for me, it was like, yay, hooray! I get to use all sorts of crazy words, and I hope other people that got tapped, I'm sure did must have taken the same approaches, right? There's got to be some joy in getting asked to do a project like that.
Yeah, I'm sure, and I think it's kind of interesting too. I'm not sure if I don't know if the stuff had to get reviewed by the like Vance's estate or what.
Yeah, that's interesting. I know that like my work goes to the developer or lead, who looks at it, gives me notes back, I make my changes, and then usually that's the end. They go, okay, it looks good. It could go back for another round of revisions conceptually, but I wonder. I think the Vance estate too is assured their place kind of in the legacy of science fiction and fantasy, and the fact that they had the Songs of the Dying Earth, which is a bunch of authors, science fiction authors writing stories set in the dying earth, and some are more successful than others at kind of evoking Vance or the setting, I should say. I think they're comfortable. That's what I'm trying to say. Sharing what he created with people.
Yeah, sometimes they go through a review, and
Yeah,
probably depends on whatever property it is. Like for instance, if you were, I would imagine that if you were the property was to be taken from Marvel or from Disney,
yeah,
the scrutiny it would be high. It would be who you're using, how you're using them,
Right.
and maybe not the full level of check like with maybe comic books and other things, but I'm sure that there's going to be a lot more intervention with people for good or for ill. I mean, maybe beneficial. Like they'll provide you guidance too. So
Right. Yeah, you have to think of something like a huge IP like that. There's like a different level to engage with that. Whereas Jack Vance is a writer, and not everybody's even read him.
maybe the
And
stages is just as long as you write me a check, I don't really care too much.
maybe, although you kind of hear those horror stories from some writers, like the state of Clark Ashton Smith. They're like kind of down on any RPG kind of representations of his work because they've kind of been stung by you know, bad agreements that have kind of gone south or whatever. So I think it's a case by case basis.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And again, it's just probably, what are they really wanting? Like the Tolkien estate, they're probably, consider themselves, level of scripture. And
Yes.
you do,
Yes.
but of course they did allow the Hobbit, so I'm not sure how that works out. But anyway, and so it probably goes along like a lot of things. It's just that is interesting to work with intellectual property that's not your own. I know another fellow who bought an intellectual. Well, he licensed a comic book property, and it's just kind of interesting what he did and went through, and it worked. It's worked out well so far. So, but it was not a major player as far as comic book. It was, right. But there, it's he got access to art. So, if you think about it, it's like sometimes if you go to the right IP, you also get the art, which is could be huge. I don't say cost savings, but it does help mitigate. You're paying more for one thing, but you're also, especially since it's a comic book characters,
right?
He's able to utilize all the art.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, I've never kind of gotten into that space. I mean, that'd be interesting to give it a go. I know some friend of mine was like trying to make a play for something, maybe Thundar or something.
Good luck. That'd be cool. I think if you
Yeah.
could do that, everybody would be buying it.
Yes, of course.
Yeah, everybody our age would be buying it.
Yes, absolutely.
I've
never had the desire, I don't think, at this point.
You what?
I haven't had the desire to like a burning desire to go out and get something, license something, I should say.
Yeah, because I think what's going to happen is you're either going to have to go with something that is got an SRD, or an open IP, or not, that you can use for mechanics, or you're going to have to or that SRD, an OGL.
Yeah.
Or you're going to develop your own system or something in between.
Yeah.
And that's not always conducive for whatever it is you're wanting to do. And I don't know what series I would want to use or would want. Like I'm trying to think what property, if I could have anything, if I could have any intellectual property to run to create an RPG, it would be the Micronauts put out by Marvel.
Oh, nice.
That'd be what I would pick, but it's impossible because Marvel owns, a quarter of the characters and Hasbro owns the toys. So it's like, it's
impossible.
You can't have Baron Karza. You can't have Force Commander,
Yeah.
But you can have Commander Rand and Marionette and Bug, but it's like, I don't know.
I'm trying to think. What would I pick? Maybe G-Force. Remember that one with the Phoenix
ship? No, I've never watched G-Force.
It's like a, Japanimation, kind of like Voltron in a way, like five people, running this thing, and it's a spaceship that can turn into a fiery phoenix. I don't know. It's like the same story, told a million different times in Japanimation. Just one of the first ones that I ran into.
Oh yeah,
was G-Force.
Oh, I know a good one. Johnny Quest. That'd be a great one.
Oh, that it makes me think now of that uh, uh, the Cartoon Network one where there it's a takeoff of Johnny Quest or whatever. What was that series?
I've seen it.
Oh, it's gonna kill me now. Uh, it's a satire of Johnny Quest.
Oh, really?
Yes, because it's Adult Swim version of Johnny Quest. So it's hilarious. They just did a movie for it, I think. But the villains
Yeah.
are preposterous, and everything is kind of ridiculous.
Yeah. No, I have to check that out. No, not seen that, but other than that, I don't know. It's hard because I think that most of the intellectual properties that are developed, a lot of times I think it's hard to have activities of players outside of whatever the activities of that one character is doing. It's not.
Right. Metalocalypse, that'd be a great series too.
I've not seen that.
That's hilarious. Death metal band or like a Nordic death metal band, and they just have all sorts of they're idiots, incompetent, and they do all sorts of dumb things. So satire. I think I just picked some sort of satirical cartoon series.
Satire, the game, the RPG.
Yes.
Yeah, I think we've reached peak RPG design ideas at this moment. So we're probably at the point of hitting the time-space continuum, James.
No doubt. I think we have to leave it there at Metalocalypse.
We do. Metalocalypse. I don't think we can improve upon that.
No. You thought that I thought I only would never write any systems. Now I have to write two.
Excellent.
Yeah,
oh, man,
it's been a lot of fun.
Hey, I appreciate it. I appreciate you coming on. And once you're, let me know once Netcrawl actually, once you're getting closer to launch.
Yes, I will definitely do that. I'll even mail you out like some beta copy here soon.
Oh, awesome.
Let you have a gander at it in print.
Awesome. Well, thanks again, James, and good luck with getting through your Netcrawl.
Amen. Thanks. Be one system at a time.